Good afternoon, Endeavour. Here we are. It's story time, and I'm just going to finish off the rest of the chapter called The Big Knobbly Stick. Remember where we left it on your Saturday afternoon treat, where Charlie and Jimbo have discovered why all these aliens aren't making it back to Earth, because Becky's whacking them one with a stick. Let's see what happens. They haven't got long. Time for you to get your big stick. I took my hand off Becky's mouth and she said, "Would you tell me what is going on? And why is there an imaginary policeman? And who are you talking to?" But Charlie didn't get a chance to explain because a blinding blue light was pouring out of the sky. Then there was the ear-splitting boom and the light went off. Becky picked up her big knobbly stick and ran over to the ruined cottage and lifted the stick over her head. The cover slid sideways and Mrs. Pierce's head emerged from the hole. Becky did what she always had done and hit Mrs. Pierce hard with her stick. Mrs. Pierce squealed and rolled sideways and lay face down on the earth, completely unconscious. "Oh no," said Becky. "I've just actually hit a really old lady over the head." "Actually," said Charlie, "that's Mrs. Pierce." "Oh no," said Becky. "I hit your actual history teacher over the head." I bent down and started lifting Mrs. Pierce's skirt. "This'll make you feel better." "Jim, what are you doing?" said Becky. "I need to show you something." "You sick little boy," said Becky. "I'm not looking at a teacher's bottom." And there it was, coming out of a neat little hole, a bit like a long hairy parsnip. Mrs. Pierce's alien tail. "Geez," said Charlie, "that is going to be burned in my memory like forever." "Becky," I said, "open your eyes." "No." "Open your eyes." "No." "Open your eyes." Becky opened her eyes and looked down and screamed, "Ah!" Then everything was lit up by a bright blue light and the mountains rang with a deafening boom. Except we didn't take much notice because we were all so freaked out by Mrs. Pierce's tail. And then we heard someone say, "You little horrible humans." And we spun round to see Van Tresillian rising out from the wet beam tube. Becky ran towards him and lifted the big knobbly stick and swung it, but this time he was too quick. He grabbed the end and yanked it from Becky's hands. "Narking frotter!" he yelled, his eyes sparking with blue light. "I am toasting you now." And he reached for his wristband. "Stop him!" shouted Charlie, but Becky had already whipped a can of L'Oreal extra strength hairspray from her back pocket and squirted him in the eyes. He screamed and raised his hands to his face and fell to the ground. "The wristband," I said, and stamped on Van Tresillian's arm while Charlie yanked it off and flung it as hard as he could. We stood and watched it sail through the air until it plopped into the water next to a little boat moored on the rocks. Van Tresillian said, "Ah!" and Charlie said, "Jimbo, your sister is one feisty chick." "I'm assuming that's a compliment," said Becky. "Yeah," said Charlie, "but when Van Tresillian doesn't check in, someone is going to press that button and we're going to explode. We have to do something spectacular in the next minute." Van Tresillian got to his feet and staggered around blinded, trying to find us. "Petrol," I shouted. "There's petrol in the boat. We set fire to the wet beam thing. We'll blow it up." We ran down to the water's edge and tried to lift the outboard motor off the stern, but it was too heavy. "Forget that," said Becky, holding a red plastic fuel can. "This is what we need." We ran back up the grassy slope to the ruined cottage. "It's closing," shouted Charlie. "The wet beam's closing, quick." I grabbed the broken knobbly stick and shoved it into the hole. It splintered and cracked. Charlie and Becky staggered over with a rock and jammed it into the gap. The mechanism squeezed and juddered and gave off a lot of evil brown smoke. Becky screwed the black top off the red plastic can and poured the contents into the wet beam unit. "Now," she said, "let's set it alight." "How?" Becky paused for a moment. "We haven't got a lighter." The mechanism juddered and smoked and the rock cracked into two pieces. "Crate's lighter." I searched madly through the pockets, the cigarettes, the wallet, the oily fluff, and the lighter. I threw myself to the ground and shoved my arm down past the lid. "Stop, you moron," shouted Charlie. "You'll blow yourself to pieces." He ripped off his shirt and shoved the sleeve into the mouth of the petrol can, and then he pulled it out and set light to it. The rock finally shattered. Charlie shoved the flaming shirt through the last inch of shrinking gap and shouted, "Run!" We ran and hurled ourselves to the ground and waited and waited. Absolutely nothing happened, except for Van Tresillian wandering into the ruined cottage moaning with his arms stretched out in front of him like a zombie. He was standing in the very centre of the cottage when the blue light flashed on. He screamed again, but much louder this time. Then he vanished inside the column of light and we couldn't hear him screaming anymore. The light went off and boom! Shook the mountains, and we saw that Van Tresillian had been turned into a smoking black statue of himself. One arm fell off and smashed to the ground, then the head did the same thing. It didn't work, said Charlie. It didn't. And then suddenly it did work. There was a shuddering whoomp, and the weft-beamed unit in the cottage and the black statue of Van Tresillian erupted in a massive cauliflower of orange flame. We closed our eyes and covered our heads. The heat wave hit us and it was like being run over by a really hot lorry. We opened our eyes. There was an ominous silence for 2 seconds, and then a clatter as broken pieces of highly advanced technology rained down on us. I looked up and rolled out of the way just in time to prevent myself being kebabbed by a long spear of ceramic tube wall. We got up and picked bits of ash and shrapnel off our clothing and walked back towards the ruin. Except it wasn't there anymore, just a black crater. There was a ring of charred stones, there were some wires, there was a triangle of cracked blue glass. I heard a little click and felt my wristband loosen and fall to the ground, and Charlie's did the same. He bent down and picked it up. You know, he said, just to be on the safe side. He drew back his arm and hurled them into the water. And this was when we saw Mrs. Pearce. She'd finally come round and got to her feet. She'd pressed her own wristband. Gretnoid, she said, not Wolvenka Berdang. And she pressed it again. Gretnoid, not Wolvenka Berdang. Her voice was getting more and more panicky. Gretnoid, Gretnoid. Charlie walked up to her. You've lost all contact with Plonk, haven't you? She growled. Brilliant, said Charlie. I'm kind of assuming they can't blow us up now, or the planet, is that right? You're going to suffer for this. I'm going to make you all suffer very, very much. Ow, said Charlie. She paused for a few moments, then she slumped to the ground and started to cry. Oh, she wailed. I'm going to be stuck on your stupid, primitive, godforsaken planet forever. Anyway, said Becky, we're off now. There are 5 of your friends tied up over there, behind the big boulder. We're going to need a bit of help. We walked back to the tent. The 5 watchers were tied up nearby. I recognised 2 of them from the red Volvo. They were all a bit snarly at first, and Charlie explained that the weft beam had been destroyed and they couldn't go home. After this, they went quiet. A couple of them cried, just like Mrs. Pearce. Becky dug around in the hold all and found a spare shirt for Charlie. We packed up and headed back down to the water. Mrs. Pearce was still on her hands and knees, crying when we walked past her. Cheerio, said Charlie. She looked back at him and whimpered like a sad dog. We climbed into the boat and lowered the outboard into the water. Becky yanked the starter cord 3 times and the engine coughed into life, and we put her down a little channel and into the sea. Tomorrow's chapter will be called Individual Broccoli Tartlets. Enjoy Endeavour!